Thank you very much to organizers for having me. Thank you for Cannafest, being Cannafest and paving the way for many businesses and many people. Good afternoon, Prague. Can everybody say cannabis? Can everybody say THC? Can everybody say CBD? Cannabidiol. Cannabigerol. Cannabichromine. Beta-caryophyllene. You know more now that you probably knew a little bit ago. Now, this is very important so that we actually start communicating some of the scientific concepts to the society and start calling cannabis instead of marijuana cannabis. Also realizing hemp is also cannabis, but the only difference is the THC and some of the molecules expressed. And I'm here today to talk about cannabis and also interaction of cannabis with the human body. Cannabis and human. The entourage, in this case, is the human entourage, beyond the cannabis and the molecules of the cannabis. We are still living in the age of stigma. Over half of the world's population, probably safe to say, has still been affected by the reefer madness where women cry for it and men die for it. And of course, this is the propaganda that was enforced by the US government and media, and it was not factually based. It was basically lies that were propagated for many, many, many decades, and those lies were telling that if a white woman smokes cannabis, she will sleep with Mexicans or she will sleep with Africans, and men that smoke marijuana, they will turn aggressive and they will become sexual beasts, essentially. And so this was the propaganda, and we're still trying to kick that. And there hasn't been an engine, social media engine, government engine, that has done completely reverse, educate people on the factual information. Factually, we know cannabis has been around for a very long time, and if you look at the cannabis from 4,700 years ago, in Gobi Desert near Terpenes, China, it actually contains high THC. So it wasn't just hemp cannabis that was grown with low THC, but it was also high THC cannabis that was meticulously cultivated, and it was recently researched and it was shown that it contained higher levels of THC than CBD. Of course, the history of medical cannabis is very long, from the first Peng Tao Chin book, which is the first book of herbs, all the way to the pagan ages, to the Christian ages, to the modern era in medicine. One of the names in Europe to point out is William O'Shaughnessy from Ireland, who really studied a lot of cannabis, worked with cannabis, rolled pills from cannabis, capsules from cannabis resin, and was really applying it in medical use. I come from Lithuania originally, so I'm Lithuanian-American, and we found this in our archives, that what you see here, Palanga, is a seashore town on the Baltic Sea. In 1466, you have Hollandai, which is Dutch, coming to buy cannabis, and they're coming to buy flax. Kanapu, right here, Kanapu is cannabis. Also, ships coming in the 17th century to the Baltic coast to buy cannabis, to buy flax, because traditionally cannabis and hemp grew along this belt from China, Mongolia, Siberia, all the way to the Central and Eastern Europe. So we have some history, of course, in Lithuania. In every country, including Czech Republic, is actually very rich history with cannabis that you should be proud of. In Lithuania, during Polish times, in the 1930s, we had the creation of the Institute for Botanical and also fiber use of cannabis hemp, and we grew this giant hemp. This is Vilnius, Lithuania, that grew to 4-story tall, and that institute has been successfully, unfortunately because of the wars, been successfully transferred to Poznan and is still existing in Poznan. The origins of it is in Vilnius, Lithuania. We were always specialists at flax and hemp. In fact, they're very similar. And so it was natural for us that we had a burgeoning industry in the Middle Ages for hemp as well as the 20th century. More interesting information, I'm sure everybody's aware, and if you're not, that the United States government has patents on cannabis and cannabinoids, medicinal properties as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. United States government actually is double hedging their bets, one on the regulation and now maybe sensible regulation, but before that criminal regulation, as well as patenting of medicines and selling this patent to the companies that want to further develop any medications from cannabis and cannabinoids. The recent push for cannabis and THC actually has been stories of children with epilepsy and mothers that carry bags of drugs that are filled with all sorts of pills, and the mothers, the experts, and the children are changing the laws. The politicians and the lawmakers are the last ones to get involved, and the only way we can change their minds is through their hearts. They will not want to understand it, but they will remember how it feels to have a child that is seizing to death, and no chemical is helping that child, but cannabis is. There's a paradigm shift because in the 80s and 90s, we discovered the endocannabinoid system. We all have endocannabinoid system. All organisms have endocannabinoid systems. Even primitive organisms growing in the bottom of the ocean have endocannabinoid system, which consist of the cannabinoid molecules or endocannabinoids that you produce inside your body, anandamide and 2-AG, as well as the CB1 and CB2 receptors that are differentially expressed throughout the body. So CB1 will be expressed mostly in, for example, this is not working, but it will be expressed in the intestines, it will be expressed in the liver, it will be expressed in the brain, but CB2 receptors will also be expressed in the brain and other organs, especially immune cells and immune organs. And cannabinoids and the cannabinoids work with these receptors as sort of a key that fits into a lock. But these receptors are really doors that have multiple locks that need to be fitted with multiple keys to completely and accurately control the function of these receptors. And so as you can see, anandamide is actually very similar in structure to THC, and that's how THC also binds to the cannabinoid receptors 1 and cannabinoid receptor 2. In the brain, cannabinoid receptors are expressed very broadly, CB1 and CB2. So if somebody tells you it only is activating or affecting the part of the brain that is responsible for motivation, that's not true. It is affecting different parts of the brain. Expression is differential in the brain of these receptors, but these receptors in the brainstem are expressed in the areas that control analgesia as well as nausea and vomiting. Cannabinoid receptors are there. Opioid receptors would be controlling the brainstem areas that are responsible for breathing and heart rate. That's why opiates overdoses are common. It's easy to overdose on opiates, and it is impossible to die from cannabis, but it is easy to die from opiates. And the cannabinoid system gets engaged on demand when there's stress, trauma, hyperexcitability, inflammation. The response of that system: go eat, you're hungry, rest and sleep, forget, because it's better if you forget some things, protect your brain, your gastric neuroprotection and neurogastric protection as well. So it is constantly balancing inhibition and excitation in the body. The endocannabinoid system is one of the major homeostatic regulatory systems in our bodies that is intricately tied with a neuroendocrine system, thereby controlling the hormone and hormone release throughout the entire bodies, not just in the brain, not in one spot. This relationship is yet to unravel. This relationship is very important, the relationship between the endocannabinoid system and the neuroendocrine system. Interestingly, endocannabinoids are also found in other plants. So other plants like chocolate produces anandamide. It also produces oleomide, which will raise the production of endocannabinoids inside the bodies. Maybe that's what makes children happy, especially if they eat dark chocolate, not milk chocolate. Or maybe it's sugar. So truffles also contain endocannabinoids. Again, people will pay a lot of money for little truffles, maybe even more per gram than for cannabis these days, right? There's a reason for it, not just the taste and the truffleness of it, but there's actually some very beneficial components inside these mushrooms that are hard to find. Paradigm shift in the latest 20th century, I would say, as it relates to the human entourage, is understanding different components of cannabis plant and understanding that most of the action in cannabis plant for cannabinoids and terpenes is in these translucent, semi-translucent trichomes that will store in the plant 90% plus of the cannabinoids and terpenes, and mostly expressed in the flower of the plant. And these beautiful flowering tops of the plant is medicinally the most valuable part of the plant, although, as you know, especially with hemp, every part of the plant can be used, including the roots. In fact, there's very good ancient literature that describes the usage of roots to extract certain anti-inflammatory components. Plinius the Great actually did that in Greece to start with. In 1964, Raphael Mechoulam took hashish confiscated from police station, went to the lab, and isolated THC. What I want to everybody understand, and I'm sure here maybe everybody does, but if you don't, hashish is not a different drug from cannabis. Hashish is just concentrated trichomes that are rolled or sifted through or other methods floated in cold water to produce hashish, which is concentrated THC. In a way, hashish is the pure form of acquiring cannabinoids and terpenes without having the plant matter, because you're isolating trichomes from the rest of the plant, the leaves and such. THC and CBD, tetrahydrocannabinol. THC is an intoxicating or neuropsychotropic agent, but it is also anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, analgesic, appetite stimulant, anti-emetic, and anti-cancer. Does it have negative effects? Yes. Can you overdose on THC? Yes, you can. I'll tell you easier ways you can dose on THC, but there's harder ways you can overdose on THC too. What happens when you overdose on THC? You do not die. It's impossible to die, but you have an anxiety, you have a panic attack, you have an increased heart rate, especially if you have a predisposition for arrhythmias. And that happens, and it's probably happening as we speak right now, to certain contingent of the people using cannabis in this area. They may not be having a good experience right now. Now, there's low rate of dependency, 1 in 9, but these are usually individuals that are still valuable and beneficial individuals to their families, to themselves, and to the society. So cannabis dependency is complex, and I'm not sure if it's just usage of cannabis rather than dependency. So this is something that needs to be explored more. High THC users go through these bouts of coughing and hacking in the morning, sometimes after brushing teeth and exposing themselves to toothpaste or some irritant. And that's because they may be developing hyperemesis syndrome, which is essentially increasing this coughing and vomiting. And you can counteract that with CBD. You can counteract it with terpenes, and you'll learn later, especially with lavender terpenes and linalool. Hot shower as well as hot peppers, spicy peppers, will help to counteract this hyperemesis syndrome. Again, it's a temporary thing that lasts 10, 15 minutes, although there aren't really good studies that report and average all of this. So cannabidiol then is where we want to talk about different components of the plant, and the plant will have CBD. If you took a THC concentrate or THC isolate, that's where you could potentially run into some of these problems that are shown here. But if your plant actually contains CBD and higher levels of CBD, that can counteract negative effects of THC. It's actually antipsychotic, neuroprotective, anti-cancer, anti-beating, anti-addiction, anxiolytic, anticonvulsant, anti-emetic, analgesic. Negative effects so far reported of CBD are fatigue and drowsiness, but CBD also has drug and drug interactions. So if you are taking other drugs, especially anti-epileptic drugs, it will have interaction with these drugs as well. This is not just my opinion. So this is the report from last year from the Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine of the United States. Cannabis and cannabinoids are effective for the treatment of chronic pain in adults, antiemetics from vomiting, and spasticity symptoms in multiple sclerosis. This is definitive. Now, we all have to be fair when you say there is not definitive or moderate evidence. And when you go and read the literature at these national institutes and so, we have to admit one fact, that while all the other literature and all the other books were written with scribes that were provided both hands to write them, and enough of the writing material to write with, everybody that has been trying to do cannabis research and to write that cannabis book for the last 100 years has had their hands tied behind their backs, trying to reach enough paint to even try to write with whatever they can. This is the analogy of how repressed cannabis research has been, is that scribe with his hands tied behind, that cannot do research, cannot write, and God forbid, some 20, 30 years ago, cannot even talk about it without losing a job or having police coming over. Okay? So let's be fair when we talk about lack of evidence, and everybody actually will set their own threshold of belief. For some people, it helped my mother, it helped my father. Anecdotes or cases that were described here by people that helped them, that may be enough. For other people, they will say experts' opinions are not very good, individual case studies are not very good, we need clinical studies, we need clinical trials, we need safety and efficacy studies. We're heading there. But at the same time, there's this plant and there's a system that we have to use at the same time, realizing that these are not individual cases or anecdotes anymore. It's hundreds of thousands of these cases that need to be analyzed properly. Cannabinoids and terpenes. We all know that cannabis has great smell, and we also know that cannabis has a variety of different cannabinoids: THC, CBD, CBN, CBC, cannabichromate, CBG, and so on. And right now, we are all talking about THC and CBD, and that's all. And this is outdated, and we all need to start talking a lot more about terpenes and the effects of terpenes and also interactions of terpenes with cannabinoids. CBD is yesterday's news. CBG is now coming onto market, and people are not paying for CBG yet, but there are companies that are clever and are looking for CBG plants and are actually realizing that there's greater value per milligram in CBG and in these other rare phytocannabinoids, minor phytocannabinoids, than it is in CBD, which of course you can buy now in tons of isolate form. So with my company, is one of the things that we have developed recently is a CBG-CBD paste at different ratios. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the company. I chose to spend most of my time educating and talking about cannabis and the science, and only at the end I will tell you about my company and products. You'll be happy if you visited us at Cannafest here too. Cannabis plant itself is non-psychotropic. While heating it, THCA becomes THC. So cannabis plant itself produces 95% plus in acidic form of cannabinoids. Cannabis plant is non-psychotropic until you heat it, until you process it. But other than that, these acidic cannabinoids have many beneficial properties. They're understudied, but recent evidence in human and animal studies show that they're just as potent antiemetic, if not potent, more potent. Or also very good at controlling anxiety and nausea. For those that are into biology, this is the serotonin system that's linked to the anxiety, nausea, and anticipatory vomiting especially. Now, to decarboxylate it, of course, CBGA first is the precursor. With THCA synthase becomes THCA. With heat and decarboxylation, you take this OOH group right here. That's what decarboxylation is. And in that process, you create THC. If you decarboxylate CBDA, you will create CBD. And this is done basically after the plant has already been harvested. And we see a lot of benefit in acidic cannabinoids because it's raw preparations that we use a lot in our products, and also a lot more unique and more compounds that you can have in there. But it's not always more that's better, right? Now, what is the perfume industry here? And Dr. Luca Turin's book, which I highly recommend, The Secret of Scent, has to do with cannabis. It has everything to do with cannabis. Dispensaries are not selling you THC and CBD. When you come in the dispensary and you have choices of flowers, many of them will have the same percentage of THC and the same percentage of CBD, even the same ratio, 20:1, 20:1, 20:1. You may take a flower that agrees with you, you heard of, it's already your favorite, your friend loves it, the guy behind the counter says, my favorite is this. Great, I'll buy this, right? Why? You don't know. But if you're smarter, you're going to smell the flower. And if you smell the flower, you can learn certain things about it. Because smelling the flower is not only psychology, it's also physiology. So shorter molecules are the top notes when you produce perfumes. They're short carbon chains, only 6 carbon in there. They're short molecules, they're volatile, very monoterpene-like molecules, like citrusy smells, flowery smells that you smell from afar when you enter the cannabis garden or when you enter the flower garden. Then when you come closer to the cannabis and after some time, minutes and hours of smelling it, or if you have perfume on you, minutes and hours, this perfume will start exuding longer carbon chains, the heart notes. And then hours or days later, they will start exuding longest or bottom notes, which are usually linked to animalic smells and also wood-like smells. These are long carbon chains. The perfume industry have thought of this very thoroughly. They want, with the top notes, to get an attention and attraction, with the heart notes to get to the heart of the person, and with the bottom notes for that person to turn into a beast in bed. This is linked to psychology and human interaction, sexual interaction, and attraction. You are exuding something when you carry around yourself this ball of perfume cloud. People in the Middle East, and especially in the Emirates, could tell us a lot about it because they have wonderful perfume clouds that usually surround them based on oils, and a lot of it are these heart and bottom notes that you see. So if a molecule is over 16 carbons, there is no odor, there's no cannabinoids. You cannot smell it. If you cannot smell it, you're not smelling THC and CBD. You're selecting your flower by terpenes. Better smell, fresher flower. What are we talking about? We're actually talking about a new science, a new field, aroma psychophysiology, as it relates to cannabis, as it relates to doctors in understanding what is the physiological side of it, and to the consumer, what is the psychological side of choosing a particular strain, and neuroeconomics. A dispensary, I mentioned that before, can have a great smelling cannabis that has a top note, and everybody will smell it and buy it, but it may not be the best bud that that dispensary is selling. And the consumer may not go back to that dispensary because they didn't get the best feeling. Smell is not all. So cheap thrill smells, tutti frutti, things like that, may not have the best effect on you, but this is something that each individual's entourage has to learn as it interacts with this plant. This is work by Kate McLean. It's a map of the old Reiki, Edinburgh. It's an artist. She walked around, and what she did is wherever she smelled sea, she painted the map of sea in a certain way. This is the map of Edinburgh, the smell map of Edinburgh. There's breweries, so there's a lot of brewery points shown in blue and the clouds of blue that she imagined as she walked around the city and smelled it everywhere. So you have the smell map of the city. Why did I present that to you? Because you have the smell maps in your brain. These volatile molecules are not just psychology, it's an immediate physiology. When they enter through your nostrils, they go directly pass through the crystal galley in your bone structure in the skull and penetrate into the olfactory endings and olfactory processing in the brain. And the brain will create different maps for mint, and that map will be different from lemon map, where the red spots is the active activity. As it is reacting, the brain is reacting to the different terpenes that it is inhaling. So as you inhale these terpenes, you create a brain map. That brain map is not only psychology, because Olfactory centers are also linked to other centers in the brain. I'll give you an example. You smelled some cookies, and all of a sudden it brought you back memories, right? Those were my grandmother's cookies. What else did you remember? Maybe, oh, I used to drink milk with it. I felt so great. All of a sudden you have emotions, you have memory that gets evoked by that smell. And so cannabis, eventually, as you interact with it, should do the same to you and also protect you. You protect yourself, and the cannabis will protect you because it will tell you something about, this is who I am. I'm lavender. We're going to go away in the dispensaries from talking about indica, sativa, and hybrids. We're going to have dispensaries. They're going to have lavender corners. They're going to have diesel corners. They're going to have fruit corners. And this is the experience, and not just psychological, but also physiological, because a lot of these strains will also have similar components in as far as the cannabinoids go. Now, physiological effects of terpenes are listed here. I don't have enough time to go through all of them, but D-limonene is a potent anti-cancer. Beta-myrcene is a potent anti-inflammatory. Alpha-pinene is extremely interesting because it's acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, so it acts similarly to Alzheimer's medications. Linalool, which is found in lavender, is analgesic, anxiolytic, anti-inflammatory, anticonvulsant. Some of these terpenes are very valuable. They're found in cannabis. They're also found in other plants and fruit, of course. Beta-caryophyllene is a CB2 receptor, this cannabinoid receptor 2 selective agonist. So high levels of that will be found in cloves and peppers and hops, in copaiba, and in cannabis. And some of the hemp strains are actually dominated by beta-caryophyllene. So cannabis entourage is the interaction of all of these molecules that will be found in cannabis. It's a challenge. I just told you that we have this really complex system in our bodies, in almost virtually every cell in our bodies. We also have this plant that has 20 chromosomes and produces over 1,000 molecules. Understanding the interaction of these two complex systems is a challenge. By understanding it, we can actually individualize the treatments, individualize the benefit to the individual from these cannabinoids and other components. If you have more of the cannabinoids, you'll have multiple targets throughout the body. They can facilitate absorption or delivery of active ingredients better, counteract or minimize adverse side effects, such as, for example, THC. If you balance it with CBD, less likely to have a panic attack or psychosis. Whole plant phytocannabinoid extract compared to phytocannabinoid isolates. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But I also want to do a cautionary note here. More is not always better. If you have a patient that is taking 15 medications, maybe they should just try CBD. Because if they're going to try a full spectrum extract, it will contain 200 components, and they will not know which one is actually helping them. This practical, deductive reasoning with your own body and the substances is what will lead individuals, their entourage, to the entourage of the plant that is most agreeable and most beneficial to them. So this is an example of wheels, terpene wheels. On the left we have an example of OG Kush as it was recreated by the True Terpene guys. On the right, orange cookies. These colors represent different terpenes. Which wheel are you? Which wheel agrees with you the best? And slowly and surely, even you look on the leafly, when they show these wheels of terpenes and they describe strains, there's now a cautionary tab that says negative effects. Okay, let's not stop thinking about it. There are some negative effects of cannabis, and some people will be affected in that way. But this is the future. You're going to go and find your wheel. This is going to be your wheel in your product, your tincture, your vape, your flower that is most going to agree with your entourage, the human entourage, and your human wheel, so to speak. Cannabis and hemp and cannabinoids, oils and products. A lot of people, if they don't know about cannabis and hemp products, they can walk in the store and get completely overwhelmed and may not even understand, and they may even think it's the same product. One thing is to know is that about 70 to 80% of products in the market are white labeled. When you're working with companies, you want to make sure those companies are making the product, that they're not just marketing somebody's bottles that were shipped into them and they put their label on, which is fine also, and we need that, and we need marketing companies and distribution. But those companies should also be tightly tied to the source of the hemp, to the source of the extract, the production, and be able to demonstrate that. Okay? So hemp seed oil, and when we talk about cannabis, I want to start changing everybody's minds, especially here at Cannafest. This is not just for smoking and vaporizing. It's food, it's medicine, it's housing. Seeds will produce great omega amino acids, 50% protein. One of the healthiest oils that you consume is hemp seed oil. Great substitute for fish oil if you're a vegetarian. Full spectrum hemp oil is essential oil of hemp, and it will be pressed from the entire plant or flowering top of the plant. And it will contain as much molecules as possible, depending on the extraction that you use, whether it's supercritical CO2, cold extraction, or cold alcohol, distillation, and so on. PCR oil is an emerging trend, and you will see it on some of the labels. It's a phytocannabinoid-rich oil. It's an oil that contains usually one dominant cannabinoid, like CBD, maybe a little bit of CBG, maybe a little bit of CBN, but not much, in sub 0.1, 0.2% ranges. But it's distilled where THC is removed. The terpenes from that plant are separated but preserved. And in the end, you saw these nice, beautiful honey-looking extracts before. That's what they are. It's just CBD, maybe a little bit of something else, and terpenes from that plant. So it has been stripped, it has been purified, maybe not. Refined, yes. Pure, I think, is the representation of the plant the closest in the extract as it is in the plant itself. CBD oil can be isolated. It's separated from the plant. It actually looks like powder. This powder is usually soluble in oil. It is quite easy to work with, CBD isolate. You can dissolve it in olive oil and have olive oil with CBD. You can dissolve it in creams and topicals and have it with CBD as well. And I'm not going to knock down on isolates. I'm not going to say that isolates are bad. Because for me, each ingredient and each oil has its purpose, has its customer, has its consumer. There is no best product on the market. There is no top product in the market because there is no top. We haven't reached the top. We're here. We're at the tip of the iceberg, and a huge piece of ice is underneath that water that we're yet to discover. Okay, so the tip, not the top. Hemp is entering back into our food chain. We have crop farms that will be using hemp. We have animal feeds and fisheries that will be using hemp and preparations from hemp. Phytocannabinoids will find their way onto the food, and also in the form of hemp protein powder. This is one of the powders that we produce. So now cannabis, let me check on time if I go on another excursion here. Okay, I think I'm good and still on time. Cannabis is the enhancer, not the gateway. It's not the gateway drug, it's the enhancer. 21st century, we are experiencing historical events. Why? Because pharmaceutical model is now being challenged by new parallel healthcare models, whether it's holistic, natural, organic, or medical cannabis. Or medical cannabis. These new diffusive models in cannabis healthcare might revolutionize close to 50% of the healthcare, 50% of drug development, 50% in approaches of treatment in individual, 50% based on the fact that the endocannabinoid system enhancers are also found in certain foods. I just told you about beta-caryophyllene that has nothing to do with any controlled schedule. Beta-caryophyllene, it's not on any controlled schedule. It's a CB2 selective agonist. And of course, we have to remember long history in the United States when big pharmaceutical companies, Eli Lilly, Park Davis, and Squibb, were selling cannabis products in the pharmacies, and they thought it was great, and they never asked the U.S. government to remove these products from the pharmacies, and the healthcare and medical professionals never asked the U.S. government to ban these products or call them dangerous in any way. If you're in this industry for the benefit, you have to realize that this is not only the money that you're in for. You're in for the progress and the profit of the society. If you look at the origins of this word, to advance in Latin, profit, progress in Latin, profiter and profit. So progress and benefit, this is what we are doing. We're changing the laws, we're changing the thinking, we're enriching our society with alternatives and treatment alternatives, and real benefit and real profit stands at the crossroads of a healthy and smart individual that is also well-to-do. Reconstructing these products is very interesting and it's very challenging. There's a lot of science that's go in. You cannot just say we made 2-to-1, we made 3-to-1. Now it's a bestseller, it's fantastic, top. It's a top product you'll find. There's so many variations, there's so much science, there's so much patience. We're applying decades of knowledge from science, decades of knowledge from agriculture, working in Lithuania, United States, communicating with doctors so we can make these products better, the variety of products. So we produced healthcare practitioner's guide to CBD and what to look for. The group before us were completely right. You need third-party test results for your products. You have to analyze what cannabinoids you have in these products. If you have CBD, if you have CBDV, CBG, CBDA, THCA, what ratios do they come into? And these should be signed test results by the third party, not with a logo of the company from which you're buying the product. Dosages. We know that, for example, CBD is safe, and we know that cannabis is safe in the sense that you cannot die from cannabis. But even with CBD and awakening the endocannabinoid system, some of the people can be sensitive to it. And now what you have is when you have these products, you have to look at the concentrations of the dominant cannabinoids, ratios of those cannabinoids, carrier oil. If it is your essential oil of hemp, or is it distillate that has been mixed with hemp seed oil, or is it isolate that has been mixed with avocado oil? Okay? Carrier oils, concentrations of the dominant terpenes are key. All of the healthcare professionals, I think, should start paying attention to terpenes and start paying attention to those wheels. And those wheels should be accompanying test results for the companies as well, for their flower as well as any products. Why you cannot die from cannabis, this is the slide. Because if you look at the slide, what you see here, this is LSD and psilocybin. This is active dose over lethal dose, okay? Which means that you cannot die from LSD of psilocybin unless you consume 1,000 times more of an effective dose, which makes you trippy. With cannabis, you cannot consume 1,000 joints. Your system will shut itself down. You'll fall asleep, you will pass out, or you will have so much paranoia, you're not going to want to take another puff, okay? So it's a system that regulates itself. Alcohol, unfortunately not. 10 times more alcohol and you're dead. So when people are passing out from alcohol intoxication, they're borderline on the death row, okay? Now, on this axis, what you have is the dependency potential. Marijuana has dependency potential the same as caffeine. So in fact, caffeine is more dangerous than marijuana because you can kill yourself on caffeine 10 times of the dose, and it is as addictive as cannabis, and potentially even more so because it has permeated into our culture so much. It's a psychoactive substance. We didn't think about it. Now, nicotine, forget it, you know, highly addictive, and again, 20 times of the nicotine dose can be deadly to you. Sugar, yeah, 15 grams of sugar, you're dead. No, 1 can of Coca-Cola, absolutely, there's more dangerous substances like sugar. Now, you have to be careful when you select your products. You have to be careful when you think about your human system. There was a question, what happens when you inhale? When you inhale, there is no metabolism. Your smoke or your vape goes directly into the lungs, into the bloodstream. The best way to get cannabinoids into the system is through the lungs or through the vaginal or anal suppositories. That's the best way to get it straight into the bloodstream. If you're ingesting something, you have to wait because it will start processing in the stomach within a minute, intestines within the hours, and when it starts processing in the stomach, that's when you start feeling the psychotropic effect. And so be careful because if you take an edible, it's not going to have the same effect. It's going to get metabolized. It can produce a secondary metabolized, which is 11-oic THC acid, and it is more intoxicating and psychotropic than THC itself. So if you are taking more edibles, now you have two things working in as far as the intoxicating agents in your body. Now, psychosis and bipolar, we have to be careful about that. People that are prone to psychosis, bipolar disease, they should select their cannabis carefully. They should be aware that THC can promote psychosis and panic attacks and that CBD can reduce it. Okay? And that if you're choosing a cannabis strain, you potentially, a product, want to potentially try something that is dominant with CBD before you try something that THC dominant. There's low percentage of cannabis allergies, and again, we have to pay attention to drug and drug interactions and metabolism of cannabinoids because we are already potentially using other medications, and they may be using the same routes of metabolism in our bodies, thereby exacerbating the effects of the pharmaceuticals, most commonly, rather than cannabinoids. Now, food and protein. If you go to the gyms right now, you'll see whey powder or protein, which is cow milk. Hemp protein and seeds can offer plant-based protein, 50% protein with omega acids, omega amino acids, essential amino acids, vitamin D, and other goodies. Which one are you going to choose? Cow protein, one thing, isolate, or plant? I choose plant. Cannabis reconstructed, again, this is very complex, and an individual encounters a variety of products, what to do with these products, how to use them. If they have a serious condition, they should consult with their physicians. In our company, we will send them to the physicians that we work with. Those physicians will do additional work with the patients, and will send them back for products if they see these products fit for that particular patient. We continue this dialogue between the patient and physician in adjusting this circle here for the best benefit of an individual. Fine-tuning the products is very important for individual, and the future is individualized cannabinoid medications, understanding these entourage wheels, understanding human and the interactions between them. Now we need a lot more standardized gross and product. We need complete control of inputs and outputs. We need databases and analyzing these databases, paying attention to liver metabolism and drug interactions. You will find me anywhere along this chain, from the seed into the field, into the finished product. I like working with products, and we've created a lot of great products that use distillates, that use full spectrum. We grow some of our own hemp in Lithuania. We apply our knowledge and we select our own hemp from others in Lithuania, in United States, select the best ingredients that are tested with third-party test results, and offer a variety of products. We're very careful about making claims that our products help from anxiety and sleep. You know it does, you know you can learn about this, but it's also an individualized thing. It may not help you with what you think you want it to help, but you may sleep better all of a sudden, and it's going to make your life better, less anxiety and so on. So I invite you to visit our booth here in Cannafest in Hall 5, Florence World. We are creating a world where cannabis is one of the components, but we are combining cannabis with other fruit like black currants, with flowers from honey, with blueberries. We think that there's entourage of hemp with other fruit and molecules as well as with the human body. And we do these formulations based on our deductive reasoning and knowledge and communication with medical doctors, not just mythology and as such. I'd like to thank our first of all, partners, and this is my contact information. If you want to find me directly, it's Jokubas at Meditaurus. So Meditaurus is a holding company, and Florence World is a brand. You will see that we're members of AHA, Hemp Industries Association of the United States. We work with doctors in the United States and in Europe, as well as we're strategic partners for the Cannabis Mercantile Trading Exchange. So thank you very much.